Hello. Dreams, man, they're such a trip, aren't they? I mean, when you begin to consider that place you enter in your dreams, some bizarre at least not as commonly considered when you're awake, if you know what I mean. In your dreams, or in my dreams, and I can be very presumptuous here, um, speaking of dreams in general, I really only know of my dreams, but having shared with some people uh, to a greater and lesser number than perhaps you have, I could be presumptuous in thinking I understand, but there seems to be a common thread that, man, you're just out of control in your dream, you know? At least in part. You, you're a participant in something that's to your waking mind, or so-called waking mind, very, very strange, right? Bizarre. I am the walrus, cuckoo, cuckoo. The Persistence of Memory by Salvador Dali, things like that. Surreal, surreal, under the real, surreal. And we call waking the real, and we call the dreams the surreal, or of the surreal, of the subconscious. But man, we find out there are links there that are unbreakable, unshakable, untouchable by ourselves. You know, we'd like them to be, right. Uh, we'd like to have some control, but in the dreams, very often, or most often, we seem so much to not have any, and that can be for pleasurable dreams as well as those that terrify us. Those visions in the night that scare us awake, make us feel a blanket and say, oh, thank goodness it was just a dream. This is what's real. You know, or look over at our wife or our cat or our dog, or feel the headboard, or turn on the TV. Oh, this is what's real. That wasn't. And perhaps there's nothing more tedious in the realm of brothers and sisters speaking to one another as discussing our dreams. It's a little bit like old grandpas taking out their wallet and showing pictures of their grandchildren if we start to talk about them. But I do have a few to speak of, and God knows whether you'll find the grace to bear or not, and that's between the Lord and you, surely not my purview, or in my purview. But dreams, man, you know, I remember distinctly a couple of decades ago, not that many, but a few, where it just happened in the dream, but it was refreshed to my so-called waking mind that it had happened. Now, when I say it, it's going to be no more nor less indicative of that place we enter where we seem to have no control. But in the dream, I was speaking to another character in the dream that was not me, or from my perspective, and I'm assuming you have that too. You have a dream, there may be others in the dream, but there's a you in that dream that's experiencing, so to speak, that dream, like a first-person viewer of that dream. And this other character asked me something. It was it was in the form of a riddle, and I didn't know the answer. And when this character gave me the answer, it made perfect sense, even in my waking. And unfortunately, I don't remember what the riddle was, but it was somewhat silly and childish in a way. You know, as a man might say, well, when is a door not a door? When it's ajar. But of that type, and yet in the dream, as I said, it made perfect sense. And then in my waking, even then, it was somewhat amusing and of perfect sense. And so the question then becomes about the dream and dreams, if it is the I, or I in some sense, or whatever sense I exist making up the dream, or in the dream, or having the dream, so to speak. How can I have a dream in which I don't know the answer? And yet, okay, we can concede to something called the subconscious, where things are boiling and cooking, and occasionally they bubble up to the surface, and we don't know where they come from, and they're as foreign to us as another person that we've never met speaking to us. But then we find out that's really no different than when we're awake. When waking thoughts come to us, we assume, for whatever reason, of more control in the what we call the awake state than we have in the dream state. But do we? When thoughts just come to us and they're new to us, or they're fresh to us, or we weren't thinking along those lines, or we had no intention of going there, so to speak, as dreams so often do take us to a place that we had no intention of going to. And I've talked to people, as you have, and I share with people how in my dreams so often, if there's a chase going on, or I feel like I'm being pursued, and that by a malevolence or malevolent ones, who might even be armed. It seems like they all have working weapons, and I have a water pistol to defend myself with. Or as this one brother put it, which has also been no less my experience, I've got a gun, but the bullet only comes about this far, and it impotently arches or follows the arc to the ground. It's just, it shoots a bullet, but it doesn't get very far, and it has no power. And he's had the same experience. Now, of course, if I'm making up a story, and I'm making it up for my pleasure, I sure want to be able to defend myself. But in my dreams, I find there's a place of no defense. And so thinking of that and beginning to consider even waking, I find also it's a place where I have no defense. I have no defense against the thoughts that come against me, in the sense that I can prevent them from coming. Now, in the Lord, we know that we can resist, but those thoughts come unbidden, and we say we know who they are presented by, be that as it may. But we can't prevent temptations. No temptation has taken you but such as is common to man, but God is faithful. So we are tempted, if we want to put a certain classification of thoughts into that, or a certain manner of thought into that classification of being temptations, or horrid thoughts, or all of a sudden fears of the future, or fears of what may be, fears of even what can be occurring when we're beset by sudden fear. And there are, of course, recommendations and instructions and advice in the scriptures and commands, if we take it that way. Be not afraid of sudden fear. Be not afraid of sudden fear. Well, there's a whole discipline involved in learning what that means, first of all, and how, by the grace of God, that might be thwarted, the sudden fear, to not be afraid of it. But I didn't want to get into all of that. But the point being that who are we in the dream? In the dream, we do have a certain point of view. It's not much different, actually, than the point of view we have waking, except we are rarely pressed to consider it in such measure. That there's a one beholding and some participation, and there's one being acted upon by either other actors or circumstance or situation. But if we concede, okay, when I'm waking, I'm dealing with a world of reality that is doing that, the situation, it's presenting me with the situation that are causing thoughts. But in the dream, if we say, well, there's none of that, it's just me in my mind finding situation, thoughts, circumstance, perhaps terrors, being made up by my own mind, then it becomes rather if not puzzling, at least worthy of consideration. And we know that in regards to dreams, the Lord often speaks of dreams, and has in the scriptures, through the scriptures. The Spirit has spoken of dreams, and the Lord himself, had visions. I beheld Satan fall as he saw. A vision is a saying. I beheld Satan fall as lightning from heaven. And so there is a beholding into a realm, or a beholding in a realm, over which we have no control. And to find that is no less in effect, or no less the reality of our being in the waking world, so to speak, as it is in the dream world, I consider might well be something the Lord would have us consider. That as little control as I have in a dream, I have in what we would call the real world. Now, the Lord doesn't leave us there. Thanks be to God. He doesn't leave us helpless to every circumstance, thought, consideration, fear, terror, even pleasure. He doesn't leave us helpless before these things. And so I did have what I would call and have called my Hitler dream, wherein I rebuked Hitler for his self-pity. And I've shared that before, and there's a video of that somewhere on here. But a more recent dream, one that involves some of those things of pursuit and malevolence, of a consciousness after me, about actually a person in the dream, after me. Excuse me. And so it was that I was captured in a house and seeking escape. And I was not alone in my being captured. There were others, and at least particularly one other with me. And at one point, our nemesis, the one who had captured us, the one who had imprisoned us, gave occasion for us to sneak out. I think we did it behind his back, and it was nighttime. So we snuck out of this house that was more or less an English estate, but a huge English estate, kind of old in its adornings, its decoration. And in my mind, it was very much that, like an old English estate. So we crept out, we snuck out, we began to get away, and it was nighttime. And suddenly the one who had captured us was aware and was pursuing us. So we were outside at night, and I found a hedge, a long hedge, against which I laid myself at the base in the dark, having on a hoodie not unlike this, that I could pull over my head, dark. And I pressed myself into the base of the roots, toward the roots of this hedge, and just laid still as I could be, thinking that in the dark I would be very hard to see or discern, laying there against the bottom of those bushes. And I was. But the fellow I was with, having turned the corner after his escape, was a little more noisy, and I heard the evil one, the pursuer, come out, and hearing him, I heard him pursue him, saying something like, here he is, here he goes, and then I heard a shot, and there was no more activity of the one with whom I had escaped. And I feared that he had been done away with. But I lay there still as could be, knowing that the fellow who had shot him was going to come back, walk past me to go back into the house. And as I lay there, I was aware the night was going on, and it was going to become morning. And in the morning, in my dream, I knew I would be plainly visible I wouldn't just be consumed in the blackness under those bushes. It would be plain where I was, and what I was doing. So I got up and began to run while it was still rather dim. And I ran toward the edge of the property, or what I believed was the edge of the property, to make my escape. And in doing so, I was aware that now I was being pursued, not in particular by this presence, this malevolent presence, but more or less by what you would call his henchmen, okay? Those who had been sent out to find me, capture me, do with me what they would. And in the dream, I was running away, and then I turned in the dream and kind of backpedaled as I'm watching behind me for what's coming out of the darkness. And I see a shape beginning to take form coming out of the darkness. And it is indeed one of those henchmen, and he is armed with a weapon. And as he draws nearer, and now I know I am in his sight, he is pursuing me with me in his sight, not far from him. And I am suddenly, in the dream, very aware that it's a dream, very aware that I have no control over what's going to happen next. This is an unfolding as new to me as anything. I do not know what's going to happen. I have a suspicion this man is armed. I have a suspicion because this man I know in my mind and heart is working for that, call him evil prince. And I do halfway expect what the outcome is going to be. And this fellow looks at me, and he takes his weapon, and he discharges it into the air. And in my mind, in the dream, I have the conviction that he has done this, sent off this gunshot, to let the evil prince know they have got me. But he didn't shoot me. And in my mind, in that dream, came a realization that this man, this other pursuer with the weapon, was indentured under evil pretense, or he was indentured to the evil prince, not of his choosing. It was just his estate. But that he had done what he had done, and presumably they were going to, in my mind even at the time, they're just going to tell the prince they killed me and buried me, and the prince would be satisfied. But he was no less captive to the doing of what he was perhaps had done in the past, but now did not do by not discharging his weapon into me. And in looking at him, understanding this, and having some insight into why there was such a furious attempt to keep me from getting off that estate and getting free of that property, I said to him, I will come back for you. I will come back for you. And then I proceeded to make my way safely off the property, and then I awoke. Now, as I said, often the thing's more tedious, except maybe looking at a grandfather's pictures from his wallet of his grandchildren. But I knew I had no control in the dream. It wasn't for me to decide, oh, I want this dream to have some sort of ending other than me being shot, or me being shot at, or wounded, or whatever, or all the terrors of anticipating the shot. And yet so it was. And so I'm reminded we need to pay attention to dreams. This place we enter where we discover we have no control in our mind. We have no sense of being able to come underneath it and decide for ourselves what the outcome would be. And it is not unusual for believers to experience being accused of making things up according to some preference, or fabricating stories as a crutch. Because we realize in the dream just isn't so. We would all have very pleasant dreams if it were left up to us. Perhaps. And some of the things that we experience in our waking, we discover we surely would not have created for ourselves either. So this matter of having no control that is so easily brought to light as to even be in full effect in our so-called waking consciousness of motivation has in it a blessedness that we're not making this up. This is not a story. The resurrection is not something we have convinced ourselves of. That Jesus Christ is alive is not something of which we have told ourselves enough times or practiced a ruse in enough times to make it seem true to us. Even as I believe it was our brother Peter, for we did not follow cleverly fabricated fables when we witnessed him on the mountain. God bless you. There is a work that God is doing, does, and will do in each and every one of his children to deliver us from any and all doubts we may have about his goodness and kindness and mercy to us and toward us in Jesus Christ. And very often that has to accompany the loss, even the manifest loss, an entrance into that place where all of our preference is stripped away and we are at mercy to another. God bless you.